There's a ton of noise out there. So how do you get decision makers to pay attention to your brand? Start a podcast and invite your ideal clients to be guests on your show. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to B2B Growth, a daily podcast for B2B leaders. We've interviewed names you've probably heard before, like Gary Vaynerchuk and Simon Sinek, but you've probably never heard from the majority of our guests. That's because the bulk of our interviews aren't with professional speakers and authors. Most of our guests are in the trenches leading sales and marketing teams. They're implementing strategy. They're experimenting with tactics. They're building the fastest growing B2B companies in the world. My name is James Carberry. I'm the founder of Sweetfish Media, a podcast agency for B2B brands, and I'm also one of the co-hosts of this show. When we're not interviewing sales and marketing leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of our own business. We'll share the ups and downs of our journey as we attempt to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. I'm your host for today's episode, Logan Lyles, Director of Partnerships here at Sweetfish Media. I am joined today by Dave Cook. He is the head of growth marketing at Plaid. Dave, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good, Logan. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us, Dave. I am really excited to dive into today's topic. So you guys recently went through a website redesign, and you're going to be sharing some specific lessons learned, having that process fresh in your mind right now. Before we jump right into that, Dave, I would love for you to share with listeners a little bit about yourself and what you and the team at Plaid are up to these days.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I run growth marketing here at Plaid. That means really the quantitative side of the marketing discipline. I started my career 15 years ago doing consumer marketing and e-commerce. Then moved into B2B 6 or 7 years ago with a switch to Atlassian with their e-commerce mixed with B2B sort of software model. Spent some time at Dropbox also before coming over here to Plaid.
I love it. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days on the team at Plaid, who you guys serve and things like that.
Yeah, Plaid is it's a software API that serves the banking ecosystem. So fairly technical, but also targeting larger businesses and enterprises who want to enable their users to connect bank accounts. So our core audiences are both software developers, entrepreneurs who might be wanting to build a new product, but also the larger companies who might have a strong use case to use something like Plaid. So we're really running the gamut there from an audience perspective.
Yeah. So that actually segues really nicely into the first lesson learned that you wanted to touch on as we were thinking through some of the things that came to mind after your recent website redesign. And that is mapping out the customer journey, but being mindful of segmenting your different personas, right?
Absolutely. We had a few goals of updating Plaid.com. The main one was we were launching a new brand system, and we wanted to bring, of course, the website being the core to our business, in line with that new brand look and feel. So that was the basic goal. And of course, from my perspective, being more of a quantitative growth marketing mindset was to actually use the website as our best salesperson and to try to tee up business and close deals. So as I mentioned before, we focus on those three areas. Actually, there are more personas that we could talk about. I won't bore all the listeners with all of them. But the core personas being the software developer, the kind of business user, the business buyer, if you will, at a larger organization. And also the broader fintech ecosystem, people in banks and potential investors and folks like that we really wanted to look after. So we kicked this off with thinking, who do we want to serve with the website and in what priority order? And there is one other audience that I didn't mention in the first bit that's quite important, which is really end users or consumers. So if you're using Plaid, Venmo, or Square Cash, for example, any of these type of, or any sort of financial management application, you're probably using Plaid at some point. And we want end users to be able to kind of pick Plaid out and trust it for with their banking data. So that's another audience that we were trying to balance with going through the redesign, just to kick it off.
Yeah. So then does it become this game of, prioritizing based on your average visitors and what persona they fit? Because obviously you can't have something that speaks to all of those different personas completely equally right from the get-go of your homepage, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. There are interesting ways to try to identify a user based on source or IP and different things and show them more personalized content.
Mhm.
I think that for a company the size of Plaid and with the audience that we're serving, I think that gets quite difficult to do. So I agree with what you just said. We really need to get into a prioritization and have a
Mhm.
clear picture of who we think is visiting the website and what they're trying to accomplish. That's really where
Mhm.
we started, was mapping those out. Amongst those four personas that I mentioned, we tried to define an idealized customer journey. What question do we think they have? What are they trying to do? And how can we best answer their questions and get them to the point where they'll be most successful in their
Mhm.
journey? And that
Yeah.
was actually quite a bit of work with the design team. We did a little bit of primary research, went out and interviewed some customers and other developers, business users, et cetera, and just validated some of those assumptions that we had. And our user journeys aren't overly complex, I wouldn't say, but it was very helpful in crystallizing the decisions that we were going to make to move
Mhm.
forward.
Yeah. Speaking of those decisions, as we were talking about this a little bit offline before the interview, Dave, you mentioned you also took away this idea of balancing research and gut decisions. Can you tell us a little bit about where that came into play for you during this redesign project?
Sure. I think with design being inherently subjective, and what I'm doing on the marketing side being more inherently quantitative, you're trying to balance those two things. And so, again, laying out the core objectives for each stage in the buyer's journey, or really even for each persona. So, I helped the team to rally around a few questions when we were going through the personas. And it was essentially going page by page and saying, what do we want a user to know or a visitor to know when they visit this page? And let's really be ruthless about how we prioritize those things. It can't be more than three things, it's probably one. And then what do we want them to do? And so we focused each page in the journey around those two questions: what they need to know and what do they need to do. So that's when we did research around that also. Like I said, we talked to current customers and prospects and validated some of those assumptions. So that's the primary research. But if you look at the data, if you pull open a Google Analytics or whatever analytics package you're using, those journeys don't tend, in my experience, to really jump out at you. To say that, persona A goes from page A to page B to page C really cleanly, and then they become a customer. There's usually a lot of skipping around, a lot of different entry points. And sometimes really it's like one page to the next page and then they're kind of done.
Mhm.
So we tried to not get overly creative about what we think that journey is, but let's be obvious about, again, what we want them to know and what we want them to do, and then tracking that over time to make sure that those assumptions made
Mhm.
sense.
Today's growth story is all about search engine marketing. The company we're highlighting is SentinelOne. This challenger cybersecurity brand was set out to disrupt the endpoint protection space. Their brand was top notch, their product was innovative, but they were struggling to gain traction online in an already developed industry. Then they found Directive Consulting, a B2B search marketing agency. Within the first quarter of working with Directive, SentinelOne was able to increase their organic traffic by 128% and overall lead volume by an outstanding 251%. Now, I have a hunch that Directive can get these kind of results for you too. So head over to directiveconsulting.com and request a totally free custom proposal. That's directiveconsulting.com. All right, let's get back to this interview.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine it can be tough, especially for those of us with a more quantitative mindset, to accept that fact that, buyers' journeys are often like life. They're a little bit messy, they're a little bit scattered and not easy to easily pinpoint. But going back to those key questions, what do we want them to know and what do we want them to do, can add some simplicity to that complexity. I absolutely love that, Dave. So the next thing I know you mentioned that was very helpful for you guys was clearly defining a North Star metric for the project. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, that really goes back to those two questions of what do you need to know and what do you need to do. Rolling that up another level, we said, what does success look like for this project? And how do we quantify that? So from the design team's perspective, it was, well, everything looks in line with the brand guidelines. And it sort of like subjectively looks good. We get good anecdotal feedback. People are happy with it. That's hard to do. And that's a big check mark. because again, there's so much subjectivity amongst the stakeholders. But from a quantitative perspective, I tried to rally the team around how do we quantify success? So when we go back to the business, we can say not only does it look great, but this is the business metric that we're driving forward, and these are the results. So we went back to the audience research that we started with the personas, and we said, who is our most important persona? They're all important, but who can we really not afford to drop the ball with? And we decided that software developers, being a technical product that focuses on, it is a software API. We figured that developers really need to know what we are and what we want them to do. So we looked at API key signups for us is the North Star metric that we landed on.
Yeah, I love that. So that really can create a lot of alignment. And I think that dovetails nicely into this last point that we talked about before, is getting all stakeholders working together. Because as you've alluded to, and most folks know who have been through this sort of website redesign, you've got design, you've got web development, product, marketing, getting them all on the same page and feeling aligned can be tough. You guys actually did something interesting to create that alignment and more synergy instead of finger pointing back and forth by giving everyone access to the code, right?
Yeah, and I wouldn't say everyone, but we gave more people access to the code than you might imagine.
Right.
Our web stack was a bit interesting. We don't have a traditional CMS that we could just plug people into. So we use GitHub for not only the code management, but also for edits. There's a little bit of reticence amongst the technical teams to say, are we really going to give the marketing team access to GitHub? Like, A, do they even know what that is?
Right.
And B, are they going to break anything? And one of the beautiful things about Git is it is hard to break things. That's the whole idea. And I think that it's great for the technical teams to build credibility, all the way around, for the marketing teams to build credibility with the tech teams by saying, you know what, we're all smart people. Teach me how to fish, right? We'll get in there and we'll show you that we can be self-sufficient. It really builds a lot of empathy amongst teams and cross-functionally.
Yeah, I can imagine that sort of empowered people once you kind of got through that first hurdle of, wait, what are we doing now? And what is this? And everything there, as you know, you're moving towards that North Star metric and everybody's feeling like they're actually contributing a little bit more than they thought they were going to be able to, even, very tangibly getting more access to things, right?
Absolutely. It also kind of creates career growth for people. Everybody wants to continue to learn and feel like they're being challenged in their day-to-day. And I think it's great for both ends. Our web dev team, they've been very receptive to the idea of sitting with us periodically and walking us through different processes. And, we all feel great because we're learning how to do, we're sharpening the skills. Yeah, I definitely recommend it.
Yeah, awesome. Any final thoughts you would leave with other marketers or design team leads or whoever is maybe in the midst or quickly approaching a website redesign, since all of this is real fresh in your mind, Dave?
Yeah, I think just to recap all those points, being clear about what you're trying to do and for whom is really, really important. Easy to say, can be quite difficult once you really get into it. And then finding a metric that can quantify that focus and trying to get as much buy-in as you can around that metric. I think that really makes everything else you're going to do a lot easier. It builds empathy right away across teams because you know what you're trying to design for and what good looks like. Then again, getting more people involved in a tangible way, not just sitting in a room and talking about it, but actually rolling up their sleeves and doing work, just furthers that empathy cross-functionally. Everyone feels more involved, like they're all in it together. And invested in the outcomes. I felt like that was one of the most important things. I have a privilege of working with really smart and talented people. So that's never really a question of, can we do a good job? It's how do we get there in the least painful way and the fastest way, right? We're all maximizing for outcomes. And my experience has been the more empathy you can draw across teams, usually the outcomes end up much better. So
Yeah. I've heard a lot of smart people say lately that, empathy is so crucial in sales and marketing, as we think about understanding our clients, I think this is a very good reminder as we talk about, of all things, a website redesign, that empathy and working with our teams and working with other teams within our organization is so crucial to our success. And like you said, just because you've got a bunch of smart people in a room doesn't mean that things are going to happen and happen, as you say, painlessly. So let's show a little empathy. Let's set ourselves up for success and create great things along the way. I love that mindset, Dave. Well, if anyone listening to this would like to follow up with you or just stay connected, maybe learn more about what Plaid is up to, Dave, what would be the best way for them to reach out or find you?
Yeah, definitely can find me on LinkedIn. I believe I'm just Dave Cook at LinkedIn. Or if you want to shoot me an email, I'm always happy to go that route. It's dcook@plaid.com.
I love it. Dave, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Pleasure.
Digital marketing agencies have a tough job. You have to stay on top of the latest marketing strategies for your clients and your agency. What if there was a way you could address both at the same time? Imagine your agency putting out content with greater quality and quantity. Envision bringing your clients a turnkey solution for one of B2B marketing's fastest growing media strategies, podcasting. All those clients asking for your help with their account-based marketing efforts? Picture being the first to bring them the idea of content-based networking, showing them the proven strategy for breaking into their most coveted accounts. Here's the concept. Sweetfish Media is looking to work with a limited number of innovative agencies interested in a new partnership model. We produce a podcast for your agency. You introduce the power of podcasting and Sweetfish services to your clients. Everybody wins. Learn more at sweetfishpartners.com.